Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Tracy Hooper. Tracy is the founder of the Confidence Project. She leads dynamic presentations for high-achieving teams and provides one-on-one advising for executives and professionals in a variety of industries. Tracy has been a TV news reporter, anchor, producer, and voiceover professional. Her Confidence Project clients include Nike, Intel, Merck, and Microsoft. Tracy helps people elevate their personal and professional presence, communicate with clarity, and work together better. Tracy draws on the best of her background in TV news and storytelling with immediately actionable takeaways for her clients and audiences. Tracy is the author of the new Hello and her just released follow-on book, The Now Hello, which answers the big question, what's the confidence playbook now in the work of work? Please join me in welcoming Tracy Hooper. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be with you, Tammy.
I am so happy to have you here, Tracy. So, Tracy, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we like to begin at the beginning. Oh, that sounded like a musical. But we do. And so take us back to some of the earlier years and how those may have been formative or not in the development of all these wonderful things you've done with your career.
Thank you. Well, I grew up in a big family on the East Coast in Maryland, and I'm one of 6 children.
Oh.
Yep, I'm the second of 6. And one of my most memorable experiences happened every night in that we had dinner together around the table. And that was, people did that a lot then. And it was an interesting experience because my mother, in some sense, was the original talk show host. She would make sure that everyone got a chance to talk and everybody learned to listen. We were as interested in my brother's wrestling match as we were in my sister's dance recital or piano recital or something that was happening. And it was also interesting because my father was a TV sportscaster for 50 years in Baltimore, Maryland. He was the dean of sports. So Dad would not even go, he would go to work at 2 p.m, do the 6 o'clock news, come home in between. Sometimes he would go to a ball game in between, but when he would come home for dinner, then we would wait to have dinner so we could all eat together. And then he would go back to the station for the 11 o'clock news. My mother really felt that it was important that we were together, that we knew about each other, that we were involved in each other's lives. I really learned the art of hospitality from my mom. And every Tuesday, my grandmother would come over, Nona, and she would have dinner with us. And every Sunday, my other grandparents, Barry and Papa, would come over for dinner. So at a very early age, we all learned how to have a conversation with our elders, not only our siblings and our parents, but our elders. And those are skills that anybody can learn. People can learn how to have a conversation simply by having a chance to talk to people. And you get feedback when you do that. That's my earliest memory of my family.
So, wow, 6 kids now, and we know that you went into the news business. So you followed in your father's footsteps. Did anybody else in your family go in that direction?
Nobody else did. And it's curious, I didn't really intentionally follow in my father's footsteps. I graduated from college. I was going to be a nurse. I thought, you got to go to college to be something. So I'll be a nurse because my grandmother was a nurse and my aunt was a nurse. And I was a terrible science student. And I remember calling my mother and saying to her, Mom, I was a sophomore, I'm failing out of college. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm getting A's and B's in my English courses, but I'm getting D's and F's in my science courses. And she said, Tracy, why don't you change your major? I said to her, well, if I'm not a nurse, what am I going to be? And she said, why do you have to be anything? Why can't you just be educated? And the light bulb went off for me, Tammy. And at that moment, literally, I hung up the phone. I went to the South Administration Building at the University of Maryland and changed my major. And I love to read. I love to write. I love storytelling, and ended up going into college admissions after college. I did some work for the university. And then a friend of mine said, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. And my friend Kelly Seaford Eaton said to me, well, you like to read and you like to write and you're a good interviewer. I was interviewing students who were applying to the university.
Yeah.
She said, why don't you become a reporter? And I thought, well, that's a good idea, as if it hadn't even been a part of my family. And I went so I'd work at the university during the day, and in the evenings, I would go to the local community college, and I borrowed some very basic video equipment, and I recorded myself doing some quote unquote news stories so I could get some experience. I could put together a demo tape. And after doing that for about a year, I got together a demo tape and I sent it all over the country to little tiny towns, Arkansas, in Indiana, Kentucky, any place there was a small news market. And I ended up getting a job at a little tiny television station called WBOC on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
That's amazing that you didn't even have to leave the state.
I didn't even have to leave the state. I was prepared to, but I didn't have to. And when I got there, the news director, whose name was Bill Jones, said to me, Tracy, I know we've hired you to be a reporter, but we'd like you to do the weather for a while.
Doesn't that require some science?
I know. I said, I don't really know anything about the weather. He said, that's okay. The sports guy will teach you. Sure enough, Marty Thorson, the sports guy, who'd been doing the weather and sports since the weather guy had walked off the set, became my coach. On Monday, Marty started coaching me. And by Friday, Tammy, I was on the air as the weather girl. Don't you love the language?
Of
the
course.
Weather girl.
Well,
and it was a part of the country where weather is everything for farmers and fishermen and beachgoers. And I was awful. I was awful. And the viewers were quick to tell me that. Oh, yeah. But that was a very interesting experience of having to quickly, I know we're tired of using this word, but pivot. I got there thinking I was going to be a news reporter, and I ended up being the weather girl. And then in between weathercasts, I would go out with a little scuba camera myself and shoot football games at the local high schools and come back and, put together some tape for the sports guy because he couldn't be everywhere. It was a great experience. And I'll tell you my regret. How do I say this? I was so eager to get out of a little town and in a small market.
Yeah.
That I didn't fully embrace all of the skills I could have learned when it wouldn't have had that much of an impact, when not that many people were watching. And if I could give anybody advice, it would be bloom where you're planted, learn as much as you can, no matter where you are.
Yes.
Because it's not winning or losing, it's winning or learning, as Nelson Mandela said. And I believed that. I was so eager. Let me get going to the big market. Let me be in the big city. And there was much more I could have learned in a small market.
Wow. Well, I'm curious now. Roll back the tape for just a tiny bit here. So you graduated from college, you went into college admissions, you were enjoying the process of interviewing and all that, but you could see that this was not something you wanted to do, long term. A friend of yours suggested, why don't you become a reporter? Now, was that suggestion based on why don't you become a television reporter? Or because my first thought was, why don't you become a journalist, like work for a newspaper or something?
Mm-hmm.
Did you automatically say, oh, I'll get some camera equipment and start doing interviews and filming?
Oh, I appreciate that question. I never thought about going into the newspaper business. I immediately thought about going on television. I don't know why. Well, of course, my father was in the business.
Right. I mean, that makes sense, right? But you said that you love to write. So I'm thinking, well, writing would be, right? Writing articles or something. I mean, I know you write even in television, you have to be able to write. I was just curious if that was part of your decision making, but it sounds like you went automatically to the TV medium.
Right. I did.
Yeah.
And the challenge as a TV news reporter is, of course, there is a deadline, like any journalist.
Yeah.
But you have a minute and a half to tell your story. Even the best story, I mean, there are many stories now that are longer than that, but for the most part, we would get a minute and a half and you'd work all day. You travel all over the state. You come back, you're putting together your tape. And I can remember coming back to the news director saying, Betsy, this is the best video, unbelievable sound bites. Give me 2 minutes. She'd say, Tracy, it sounds great. You get a minute and a half. No, really, this is the lead. I know, it sounds awesome. You get a minute and a half. And I learned a lot about brevity in that experience. And I hope that I've been able to carry that through with my emails today, because that too long didn't read acronym. Emails can go on and on. Voicemail messages that we can leave go on and on. Brevity is a good skill to have.
So, yeah, definitely, because you'll lose people. I'm curious, speaking of people, so there you were. I don't know how many years you were in college admissions before you got the job at WBOC. You probably were still in your 20s at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what I was like in my 20s. How did it feel when you started off and you said, I was really bad, you said to me, and you were getting feedback from the public? How did that sit with you? I mean, I assume that it took time to kind of grow that thick skin, as they say. How did you handle that?
Oh, I'm not sure I've ever developed that thick skin, which may be the reason why I'm not in the news business anymore. The public is very vocal, and even more so today. I'm grateful not to be famous today, even in a small town. There's a price that you pay for that. I learned, however, that practice makes progress. I had to get up every day and be on the air every day, whether I wanted to or not. And don't we all have to do that? We have to go to a job every day. And there's value in learning from our mistakes, watching other people. I remember there was a guy named Bob Ryan, who was the weather guy in Washington, D.C. at the time, had a huge following, extremely comfortable on the air. And every night before I'd go on the air, I'd run up into the news director's room and turn on the television and watch Bob Ryan give the weather report for Washington, D.C. I imitated him, the way he referred to the map, the way he talked about cold fronts and warm fronts and so forth. And that's how you learn. Even if you don't want to do a job that you're doing, you need to keep at it until you get something better or until you improve. And over time, I remember I got a few nasty letters. I've kept them, Tammy, all these years. But then I got a letter from a viewer named Eric Bacon. And he said to me, he sent this to the news director, actually. And he said, tell Tracy it's okay about all the mistakes she's making. She'll learn.
Well, it sounds like there was something that propelled you beyond the feedback or However, I like the way you said the public is very vocal, because I'm sure there are other words that could be substituted in for that.
Yeah. But then there were other wonderful people in this little town. There was a guy who would bring me, he had some kind of a flower farm. I forget the name. What are those really tall, colorful flowers that come out in the spring? They're long. I can't remember what they are, but anyway, he would bring me a fresh bouquet of flowers every week. Leave them at the front desk at the station, and of course, I would put them on on my anchor desk and say
nice.
thank you very much to Bob for bringing these to me, and it was that kind of experience. And I had these weather watchers, people who would call me at 5:11 before I'd go on the air at night and say, Tracy, this is Bill Smith from Smyrna, Delaware. It's 42 degrees here. And
so how long did you stay with WBOC?
I was only there for 9 months.
Uh-huh.
And then I got a job at WBAL, which was my hometown. And that was great. And I did the weekend weather. And then I was a reporter during the week. And that's where I really got my reporter chops. I worked with very talented videographers who would haul that heavy video equipment. It's lighter now, but all over town. And we would take a twin engine plane to fly to the Eastern Shore or some other place, Western Maryland, and cover stories. And I learned a lot from those videographers. I was still new in the business, but I was hungry and they were great teachers. And that was a really great time for me. And then I got married to my husband, Henry, and he was applying to graduate school. And he applied to schools in markets that were good for me. And then when we found out where he was accepted, then I started applying for jobs. And then that's how I got to WFSB in Hartford.
Oh, okay. I understand. So I was curious about the kind of reporting that you got into in terms of news. Were you sort of reacting to news as it was happening, or did you get to do more investigative kinds of work? What kinds of news were you working on?
Interesting. You're such a great interviewer, by the way. And you have an amazing...
Thank you.
I don't know whether you're taking notes, but I'm surprised that you have all the call letters down from these stations where I've worked. And I appreciate that attention to detail.
Thanks.
Larry King said, I never learned anything while I was talking. And to me, that is one of the hallmarks of being a good conversationalist, is to be a good listener. And so thank you for that gift.
Well, thank you for complimenting me. I mean, especially coming from someone who's been in the business, I appreciate that very much. Because when you are yourself, right, you lose perspective. I say this to my clients all the time. You're too close to it. You need to get feedback from other people. It's not when people say to me, for example, oh, I don't need a pat on the back. I don't need anybody to tell me how great I am. I say, yes, you do. And it's not an ego thing. It's a reflection so that you understand that there's certain things you do well, or that you have an understanding of what your impact might be. Because otherwise, how do you know that you're making a difference anywhere?
Exactly. And I suggest that people ask others to be specific. Don't just tell me I did a good job. Tell me, what was it about what I did that made it successful? Because I can repeat that. And the same goes the other way. If you're getting feedback and it's something that we all need, someone needs to work on, be specific, please. I always say feedback is a gift. Feedback is a gift. It helps us to manage our careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do need that. We need people to tell us, whether we're doing something well or whether there's something we could do differently. So I'm curious about, so you went from your hometown, WBAL, to Hartford, and what kind of news were you working on? Or did you have a
like a
as
niche.
aspirations in terms of the kind of news you wanted to cover.
Well, it's interesting. Many people, I'm sure, go into the news business because they want to have the lead story. They want to have the big deal of the day. They want to have the live shot at 6:00. And I thought I wanted that too. And at WBAL, there was a fabulous, still is, a great investigative journalist named Jane Miller. And my desk was right behind hers. My cubicle in the newsroom was right behind Jane's. And I learned many skills from listening to Jane Miller talk with people on the phone. What kinds of questions did she ask? How did she get that follow-up question answered? How could she convince someone to let her come interview them? And that was a great experience for me. I've always wanted to tell her that. She's still quite dynamic in the field. And I've always been grateful for that. But anyway, Jane got the lead stories. She was the best news reporter there was. There was another fellow there named Rich Hollander, who was also a mentor of mine at WBAL. And I quickly became the person, for the most part, who did human interest stories. Mm-hmm. And I thought, it's fluff. Who's going to watch that? But that's who I am, Tammy. You know, I certainly did cover, murders and house fires and city hall conflict and big stories. But really, I'm really good at connecting with people and getting them to tell a story. And that is essentially what I ended up doing. One of the most impactful stories in my career was at WFSB when it was first discovered about lead paint poisoning in children who would be crawling on the floor in their house. Lead paint had chipped off the wall. And they, of course, then put their hands in their mouth and they were developing brain disorders and so forth. And I worked with a magnificent videographer named Art Donahue. And he and I I think we did a 2 or 3 part series on that. That was meaningful to me. It wasn't human interest, but it was an impact story. And I've always appreciated that background.
Well, I would think that, I guess it depends on how you frame human interest, because I think of, a lot of the things you're talking about, they kind of overlap each other, right? There could be the human interest piece of, yes, you're talking about a public health issue like lead paint, but then what happens to that family when they discover that their child has brain damage? How do they get the services their child needs as a result? Or, there's all kinds of follow-on stories that could come about from that. I would imagine, not that we're planning your further stories now, but but it's interesting. So that was WFSB in Hartford, right? And so were you there just for the duration of your husband's graduate school career, or did you stay on there for a while? Or
no, it was interesting. I wanted to get back to Baltimore. I thought that's my hometown. That's where my family is. And Henry's from Baltimore too. And so he applied for jobs all over the place and got one in Baltimore. And so we did end up going back. And I would say, if I had to do it over again, I would have been more open-minded to go to another part of the country. Of course, now we live in Portland, Oregon, and many years later. Right. I was eager to go back home, and a lot of that I wouldn't give up. I was near my family and my good friends, and we raised our 3 daughters there until we moved here to Portland. But I wish I had been more courageous about moving to New York City or to Chicago to be in a bigger market. At that point, however, I did decide that I'd had enough of the TV news business, that I didn't want to chase fire engines the rest of my life. And I started to produce and host and write corporate videos. And I did that for a long time, which was very interesting. I could use all my TV news experience, but apply it to a corporate setting.
So when you left Hartford, that was the end of your TV career then?
My broadcast career.
Right.
In-house programs.
Right. I see. Well, it still sounds like it was a really good run.
It was a really good run, and I continued doing voiceover. I still do voiceover work occasionally, and that's really interesting work too. Radio and TV commercials, corporate videos, and so forth. You know, what's interesting, I've listened to several of your programs. It's interesting to hear people's life trajectories. How we
Yeah.
start off and how we end up 30
Yeah.
years later are
Yeah.
many times quite different.
Yeah. And I think we make a variety of choices in terms of how we want to live our lives, and that's what I always say to my clients too, Tracy, is, if you're just looking for a job, you don't need me. If you're trying to make a life, I can work with you, because many of us don't see our careers just as a job, or when I hear someone say something like, well, that's why they call it work, that just makes me cringe, because if that's all we went to school for all these years, or if that's what we did all the growing up years, getting ready for adulthood and all that, if all we've done is get ready for a job or to work, I hope we've gotten ready to grow up to become a productive person who can make a difference in some way or another. And I'm not talking about becoming some, altruistic, public figure, as much as just doing something that means something to you. And it sounds like, you went through several iterations of your career and made things meaningful as they fit into your life and the wholeness of your life, not just, well, I'm here, so I'm going to do this. I also want to comment on something that I think is really instructive for our listeners here. And that is, I love the way you used your powers of observation towards your own learning and how that informed. I love like how you watched the weatherman
I know.
in the other market, or that when you sat, at the desk behind the other reporter and you listened and you learned and you just, took those mental notes and just took it in. I think sometimes we're so busy rushing and trying to get from point A to point Z, we forget to just stop and listen to B, C, D, E, F, all that's in between A and Z. We're always trying to kind of get to an end point rather than realizing there's a lot of stuff in the middle there that we can absorb and learn from and just listen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you said. I'm sorry, I forgot her name at WBAL.
Jane Miller.
Jane Miller, you said she was a great listener. And you said she was the headliner. And I'm guessing by being a great listener, you build trust with people, and people are going to give you great stories if you're trustworthy, right?
Right. Absolutely. And one of the skills I learned at the dinner table, where we all had to learn how to listen, and then all the way up through my TV news career, and even today, is to ask what I call the magic words. Use the magic words. What, how, and tell me more.
I love it.
They open up conversations. It makes it rich and interesting. If someone says, what's the most interesting part of your job? What's the most challenging part of your career? What advice do you have for me? That what word, I think, is one of the most powerful words in the English language.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
how did you get into accounting? How did you get into journalism? How are you finding your experience working back at the office now after so much time at home? And then tell me more. And the tell me more piece encourages people to tell their own stories. And I believe everybody's favorite subject is themselves.
Whether they'll admit it or not.
Exactly. And when you say, tell me more, that encourages people to talk about themselves. And that's where you can then develop a relationship, or at least an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. And people love it when they feel that somebody has asked them a great question. And tell me more, even though it doesn't sound like a question, it really is a question.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
That's an interesting story. Keep going. Keep going. Jane Miller. Barbara Walters said this, and I read it years ago, Tammy. I cannot get my hands on it. I've tried because I wanted to use this quote in my new book, but my citations goddess couldn't find it in her. She couldn't find it. Nobody could. But I remember reading Barbara Walters saying, it's not the first question you ask that matters. It's the second.
Mm-hmm.
Because the second question shows that you're listening.
Right. That's a good point.
So if any of your listeners can find that quote, I will give them credit.
All right. Interesting. That just made me think about, I read her autobiography. I wonder if it's in there.
I remember reading it in a magazine I picked up in the grocery store. And I thought I cut it out. Obviously I didn't, because I haven't gotten my hands on it, but I'll buy her autobiography.
The part of her autobiography I found really interesting was her relationship with Fidel Castro and the time she spent with him. It was very, very interesting. But anyway, back to you. So back to Baltimore, back to your home territory. And I appreciate your candor and your transparency here. I think that builds trust. I love the fact that you're taking us through these steps, and you're also saying, there's something at this stage of the game where if I could do it all over again, perhaps I should have stayed a little longer, or perhaps I should have explored a little further, maybe gone to a larger market, larger city. And, I hope that you don't live with any deep regrets about that, because whatever you did do instead, that's what happened.
Yes. And I use it not so much as a deep regret.
Yeah.
I use it as a way to say to the next generation, be brave.
Yeah. Or think twice before you just jump into a decision. Like, give yourself the option to think about what else might be possible, rather than just taking the first thing you think of.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you won't still go in that direction, but give yourself a minute. Take a minute and think.
And I'm a pros and cons girl. I love to write down the pros and cons, because when it's in our head, it becomes bigger than life. But when we look at the pros and cons on a piece of paper, it gives us clarity about whether it's a good decision or not. And maybe some of the cons are bigger than we thought, or smaller than we thought. And we don't really know that until we actually see it with our own eyes.
Yeah. And sometimes when you do that, right, you put them down and then put it aside, even for a couple of days. And sometimes other things come to mind, even when you're not looking at the list.
Correct.
And sometimes the clearest things come to mind when you're not even looking at it. But having done that list actually does trigger those other thoughts. I can imagine some of those are things that you do with your clients that you work with.
Absolutely. And this is something that has come to me in the past 2 years, actually, is the idea of finding out, this is my encouragement to your listeners, find out what is your best time of day or creativity. And I learned by writing The New Hello, my first book, that I am very creative about 4 a.m. I'll wake up either, for whatever reason, to use the restroom, or because I've had a dream, or because I'm thinking of something. I must not be totally asleep. And when I've gotten up, I feel I can write better. I'm more clear. And I never knew that about myself. So I would encourage your clients and your listeners to be aware of when you are the most alive, you are the most creative, you are the most energetic. And many times I would get up, I would write from maybe 3:30 a.m. till 5. And then I would go back to bed for an hour and feel guiltless about it. I mean, this is my time of day. And I found that to be really helpful. I can't believe I'm at this stage of my life and I'm just learning that.
Well, and it may be that there at another part of your life that those hours were not necessarily your most creative too, because I think that some of those cycles change when we change. I'm not a scientist here, but change with our how our hormones change. But I'm thinking about Daniel Pink's book, When.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about these kinds of things in that book, about the cycles of when we are most. He points to a lot of the research on that. The book When really does talk about things like, yes, some of us really are night owls and we should honor that. Some of us are early birds. And so what you're pointing to is exactly aligned with some of the research that he points to in that book, When.
Thank you for that. And
Sure.
I love what you said about the idea that life is not linear. You may be an early bird at one stage in your life and a night owl at another, and just honor where you are at the moment.
Oh my goodness. It sounds delicious.
I'm learning.
So you started, from your TV career and your news career, you went into creating and making videos for corporate entities. Were those instructional kinds of things that you were doing, or?
They were instructional videos. They were motivational videos.
Oh.
They were sharing the corporate message, interviewing the CEO and then having having that go down to the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of medical videos as well.
Oh.
I'm not much of a yeller, and so I wasn't very good at the car commercials. But,
well,
they did a study and found that women who voiced banking commercials were more successful. The clients were more successful because in those days when there was a bank, you'd expect a man's voice or financial advising or something. But when you had a woman's voice with a car commercial or a bank, it made a bigger impact. So I used that for my marketing.
I love that.
Technique.
I was just thinking how, when you said, that you were going to be a nurse, but you just weren't good enough in science. And now I'm thinking, well, I'm not a doctor, but I do play one on TV.
Exactly.
See, so you did get to be a medical person after all.
I was the voice of the medical community, not the MD.
So a dream fulfilled anyway, right? So are you still doing some of that work, or you really have moved more into the work of the Confidence Project?
I do as a part of the Confidence Project, and I'd love to offer this to your listeners. I offer a complimentary monthly video, which is 1 to 3 minutes with some kind of a confidence technique or tip or skill that people can practice or have some awareness of. And so I do produce a video every month. And as a part of the new Hello, which is my book that just came out, it has 58 pro tips in it. And I've just recorded 24 pro tips on videos, and they'll be released once a week for the next 6 months.
Wonderful.
And so I use that TV news background, and I do a lot of training of professionals in various areas. And
right.
We talk a lot about camera confidence.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Zoom, we're on Teams, have all these video platforms. How do you present yourself with confidence when you weren't expected to do this with your career? We were all expected to be in an office, and now what can you do to express, to show up, to present yourself with confidence on video calls?
Mm-hmm.
I'm using those skills now for sure.
Oh, that's great. I can imagine that there are a lot of people reaching out to you wanting to know how to do that, especially since we've been in the pandemic and everybody is on video now.
Yeah, right. And honestly, many of the skills are not very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of having someone help to spot coach you through it.
Yeah.
And then once you learn the skills, you can't unlearn them. You're good to go.
Yeah. It's just that I would imagine that it's just something that people haven't done. And when it's an unknown, they create this story in their minds of, oh, this must be uncomfortable.
Right. And what also is amazing to me is now 2 years into the pandemic, that people are still not using their video capabilities as they can. I'm surprised by that. A simple technique is to lift up your laptop. Get one of these very inexpensive, portable, adjustable laptop stands. And that way it looks like you're across the table from somebody and somebody isn't looking up at your ceiling fan.
Right.
What happens when our laptops are on our desks.
Right.
But if nobody tells you that, Tammy, we keep doing it.
Right. No, you're right. There are some very simple, straightforward. Now I'm thinking, oh boy, I got to do something about that.
Yours is good. Yours is good. I'm telling you.
Actually, I do have my laptop elevated on something here, but so tell me about the Confidence Project. Why did you name it that? What exactly the details of what that includes? I know that you work with some individuals and organizations. Tell us, give us the details.
Yeah. Well, in 2014, I have some friends, and they started a women's leadership program in Portland. And they said, Tracy, would you host an etiquette evening? And I said, absolutely, anything to promote civility in America. And young women who had graduated from college had lived all over the country and had gathered in Portland. 6 of them were selected. They lived in community. They had a full-time paid internship. And then on Fridays, they did volunteer work, and it was great. They came over to my house, and I thought I would simply go over, how do you introduce yourself, and how do you introduce someone else, and how do you start a conversation and keep it going, and how do you know when to jump into a conversation? Tammy, they looked at me like they had never heard this before. And after 20 minutes, I said, would you all like to get some of your friends together and we can have a workshop and practice these skills to connect with each other? Oh, that would be great, they said. 1 month later, I had 30 young people in my living room. And I looked around and I said, does anybody know why you're here tonight? And somebody raised their hand and said, I heard this is a crash course in becoming a grown-up. And I thought, there is a business in this. And it began with young professional women. And then I thought men need to know these skills too. And then it's expanded from there. And you mentioned some of my clients. I work with high performance teams to help them communicate better, and then individuals one-on-one. But really what is I call it the Confidence Project because it is about confidence, and it's about learning skills that can boost your confidence. The big myth about confidence is that you're just born with it. You just have that kind of a personality. And there is a part of confidence that's in our genes, but the rest of it comes from taking action. I believe, and science proves it, that confidence can be learned. And with that in mind, people can learn skills that can, for instance, that can boost their confidence. For instance, how do we greet people now? Do we shake hands? Do we not? How do we feel comfortable and confident in this moment? If you are not ready to shake hands, a simple technique is to put your hand over your chest or over your heart, your right hand, so you have something to do with it, and you say, I'm not quite ready to shake hands, but it's great to meet you. Done. That's all you have to do. If you practice that simple skill enough, then when the time comes and you're in a business meeting, if you're not ready to shake hands, then you can say that. Or if you are ready to shake hands, how do you say that to people? You say, I'm perfectly comfortable shaking hands, but either way is fine with me.
Yeah.
Now that makes the other person feel good. This is one small part of what I'm talking about.
And so these are all things that you work with your clients on, everything from, really getting that more of a sense of confidence, the networking conversations, difficult conversations, but also some of the, what sounds like some of the nuts and bolts of some basic behaviors in social situations that some of us are just getting back into. And I know a lot of people are saying that it feels a little awkward to go back into a group face-to-face situation.
It does. Even the best communicators are rusty. Yeah. I have my own, coaches have coaches, and I have my own presentation coach Her name is Patricia Fripp. She's 77.
Oh, I know who
Do
she is.
you know her?
Yeah.
Oh, she's my idol in the speaking industry. And she said to me yesterday, we were on a call, and she said, even the best communicators are rusty. We haven't been out there. We haven't been working the room. We haven't been face to face with people in a long time. And I think we need to give each other a lot of grace, and a lot of space to say, okay, I got to bone up on this, but you can practice in the meantime. Practice some of these ways to engage with people. It's really about how do you make yourself feel comfortable and how do you make other people feel comfortable? And I believe that confidence is contagious. If you feel good about how you're carrying yourself, that elevates everyone in the room.
Absolutely. I think one thing I've heard is helpful too is before you go to some kind of event or gathering, make a little bit of a plan about how you're going to handle some of those things rather than filling your head with all the what ifs.
Correct.
Right.
And make a plan and practice in front of the mirror. I was invited to a big networking event, 200 people. That was a lot for this day and age. Last November for a client who had received this great award, and I wanted to support him. And I was nervous about going to a big group event. And I literally practiced in the mirror, saying to someone, I'm not quite ready to shake hands yet. Lovely to meet you. And Tammy, in real time, someone stuck out his hand to greet me, and I hesitated and I shook his hand. Tracy, oh my gosh, you practiced this. And then I just said to myself, okay, you're doing the best you can. And my parents taught us how to shake hands, look people in the eye and shake their hand. And to not do that now, I do it occasionally, but I'm not 100% all the time. It just really depends on the situation. And by the way, if it's tricky for you to look someone in the eye, that could be difficult for people. The trick is to look at the bridge of their nose.
I was just, you know what? You are a mind reader, Tracy. I was just going to ask you about that because I know that there are people who are naturally not eye contact people. Yes. And yet people misinterpret that behavior as if people don't care.
Correct.
Right.
Or yes, they think you're aloof or disinterested or not connecting.
Right.
Now, they're all those nonverbals really tell a big story about who we are in other people's minds when it might not be true.
The bridge of the nose trick.
Look at the bridge of the nose, just the bridge of your glasses, just the bridge of the nose. It's
love
perfect.
it. Ooh, that's a good juicy one. I like that.
I know.
That's great. Tracy, this has been so helpful. I have one more question for you, but I also want to make sure that we've covered everything you wanted to talk about today. Is there anything that we didn't get to?
Well, if you have a minute or two for my best business advice I ever got.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear that. Absolutely.
Great. When I was moving along in my TV news career, I was applying for jobs in New England, as I mentioned, and I got a job interview at WFSB. I talked about that experience, but it didn't happen in lockstep from WBAL to FSB. I interviewed with the news director. His name was Dick Ailes. And he said to me, gosh, I really like your demo tape, but we don't have an opening. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And that's fine. And at the time I was working with a sports agent named Ron Shapiro. And he was a top sports agent and a negotiations expert. And he was a champion of mine. I was a cub reporter. And when I got back to Baltimore, I said to him, oh, Ron, the news director liked my work, but he said they don't have an opening. And I thought Ron would say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. And Ron said, okay, I want you to go back to that news director. And I want you to say to him, I'm impressed by the people on your team and the quality of your newscast. And I don't want to miss the chance of working for you. What if I work half time in the newsroom as a producer and half time on the street as a reporter? And I gathered my courage and I practiced my pitch over a couple of days, and I called him back and he said, no one has ever offered that before. I'll let you know. 2 weeks later, Tammy, he called me and he said, when can you start?
Wow.
That was the best business advice I ever got. I don't want to miss the chance of working for you. And think about that, how you can use that. I don't want to miss the chance to share this article with you or a link to this podcast. I don't want to miss the chance to congratulate you, to thank you, to introduce you to personally invite you to let you know about, to work for you, to encourage you, to sponsor you, to mentor you. It is, I call it the magic phrase.
That's amazing. Yeah. Amazing advice.
And I'm still in touch with Ron Shapiro. And in fact, I emailed him this morning and said, I'm going to be on a podcast today and I'm going to tell them the best business advice I've ever gotten.
Well, Ron, kudos to you, Ron. You're prolific.
Yes, he is.
Because I'll probably now pass that on.
Please do.
I love that. Well, this might actually fit right in with what you just shared. The question that I often will complete an episode with is, as we know, this podcast is all about career transitions. If you were to give somebody one piece of advice, and maybe you already have given it to us, but you can think of another one. Somebody who's considering what their next move is, or what they need to be thinking about as they make a transition, what would be a key piece of advice that you would give somebody who is thinking about what's next for them?
I will quote Elizabeth Gilbert. We all know Liz Gilbert.
Yeah.
I love Liz Gilbert. She says, follow your curiosity.
I love it.
People tell you to follow your passion. You know what, Tammy? How many people really have passions? Passion, I mean, yes, okay, I hope you do, everybody, but passions are hard to quantify and you can't necessarily make a living from your passion. I admire people who do, but I feel like there's a lot of pressure to follow your passion.
Yeah.
Follow what you're curious about. Follow what you're good at doing. And there may be opportunities there. And you could start small. Nice weekends and holidays. That's how I put together my early demo tape. I worked full time, and then nights, weekends, and holidays, I put together my demo. There are always, if you're interested in writing, you can write it at different hours of the day or find those pockets. And also surround yourself with people who believe in you. Because if you don't, other people will pull you down. And you don't need that many, but somebody who believes in you, and also people who don't think the way you do. I encourage people to develop or to gather together a personal board of advisors. To people who know you well, have your best interest at heart, and have people who think differently than you, and they could give you ideas that you hadn't thought about.
Absolutely. This is great. Well, that was about four excellent pieces of advice, but I'll take them. Tracy, this has been tremendous. This has been so rich and so gorgeous.
I accept that with open arms. That's such a beautiful word. I will remember that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I've just thoroughly enjoyed talking with you and learning from you and from your observations and your experiences.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you. And thank you for your careful interviewing, that you really, it wasn't the first question, it's the second question you asked that mattered. That made all the difference. Thank you for that.
What a pleasure.
Me too.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Tracy Hooper. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn all about her professional transitions. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you're interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 181. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Perhaps you're feeling a little stuck? Check out my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon Worldwide, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and through your local public library. If you were inspired by this episode with Tracy, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please also subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.